in the short time that's available, I'm not going to try to go back and rehash the history of this. I'll just start out by saying that there's been a lot of people who have contributed to the mission since it was selected by NASA in 2013, many of whom are associated with the institutions that are shown in the base of this first slide. In 2018, in April, we launched the mission, and we started the process of carrying out a series of all-sky surveys. And the slide that I'm showing right now is a montage of what we were able to observe in the first year when we looked at the south ecliptic hemisphere, and then in the second year in which we looked at the north ecliptic hemisphere. And there's a lot of features in these images, and there's a lot of science that people have already managed to do with these. There are a lot of features that anyone on this call probably recognizes right away. The galactic plane is certainly one, the Magellanic Clouds. There's lots of other little features in these. In fact, they're just, as I'll point out later on, there's hundreds of millions of objects that one could, in principle, do science on based on this. I'm really going to concentrate today on the exoplanet observations that have been carried out in the last 2.5 years before we launched. And the way in which TESS has actually made the data available very quickly from time of receipt and analysis to the community has resulted in an extraordinarily large number of discovery papers that have appeared already in press or in preprint. This slide shows the progress that's actually been made along this lines, starting even at the time the mission was first conceived and going until 2020. This was a count that we made from publications that are on the archive back in July, and now the number at the end of the year was about 305 papers for 2020. So the community's been out there writing papers about test data at the rate of almost a paper per day. It's about six papers per week. And one of the things that I think we're really particularly proud of for the mission is the rate at which the publications have actually occurred from the time of launch. This little inset actually shows 2 other missions that have launched that have also been particularly productive, and TESS is right in family with Kepler and Swift in this regard. So for exoplanets that have been detected as of the end of December, there are 2,440 planet candidates, and about 1/3 of these are planet candidates that have a radius determined by the transit method of less than 4 Earth radius. There's a large listing of this that's on the Exoplanet Archive at IPAC that I'd refer you to. One of the things that we've been particularly pleased with is the ability of the mission to carry out photometry. This is a recent paper that Chelsea Wang and the group at MIT led, pointing out the large number of stars that have actually been photometered with very good precision over the first 2 years of the mission, in which they've determined something like 20 million light curves from 10 million stars. And one thing in particular on this that I'd like to point out is that if you plot magnitude versus precision, TESS is doing a lot better than what was originally planned. We thought that based on pre-launch simulations, that we'd be working at about the 60 part per million level, but actually we're well below 20 parts per million. In fact, you could see with this envelope of stars that are actually photometered that we're really getting down into the range around 10 parts per million for stars that are brighter than 6th or 7th magnitude, which is really gratifying in terms of the performance that the instruments are actually giving us. In fact, this is an indication in this slide of how the pointing stability actually has fed into this. It's really a key to the photometric precision of TESS, in addition to the stability of the instruments themselves. And if you look at these plots here, which show frequency versus the integrated point our spectral distribution that we actually have from the jitter in the spacecraft, you'll see that the numbers that we were looking at were 2 arc seconds and 0.006 arc seconds for 1 hour. And in reality, this is the way it's actually scaling down. And in fact, it's quite remarkable because in 1 hour, the actual 3 sigma stability corresponds to about 20 silicon atomic spacings on the CCDs themselves. So this is pretty amazing, and it's also a function of how well you could do if you're trying to do photometry from space as opposed to the ground. So this is a map of those 2,400 plus test planet candidates shown, and the ecliptic is this dark area along here. And if you then characterize those or compare those to what was known from previous surveys, both ground-based and space-based, in particular the Kepler mission, for which there was a huge number of planets that were detected in this 100 square degree region in the northern hemisphere that I'm pointing to now. And if you combine the two, this is basically what you end up with. You can see the difference between the surveys that have concentrated on the ecliptic or and in special regions in this particular plot. And so in addition to more than 5,000 that we're talking about here, there are many more to come from TESS, as I'll show in just a moment. One particular thing we've been focusing on as part of what we call our level 1 requirements is detecting and characterizing the mass for small planets. And this is a follow-up program that's been led by SAO, and Sam Quinn has been one of the coordinating people for that. There are more than 500 observers at these sets of observatories and more who have actually been contributing to this effort over the last 2.5 years. And as a result of this, the progress that we've made toward this NASA level 1 requirement of 50 measured masses has been quite gratifying. We've had 42 that are in the that are either in a journal or in preprint already, and there's another 45 that are sort of in various states of completion, not fully ready for publication, but these groups are working on them. And this is despite the many months of follow-up that have been lost to COVID-19. So our hope and expectation is that we're going to cross this finish line by July of this year, which is what the mandated date for that actually was. I'll now turn to just sharing a couple of interesting results that we've had from TESS. There's not time to really go into detail on many of these. This is one very interesting object called TOI. This is Test Object of Interest 1233. It's a multi-planet system around this really bright star, HD 108236. And in fact, this star is the brightest sun-like star to host at least 4 transiting planets. And these are what the transits look like. They're quite clean, and then the system is very flat. This is something that was well established in the Kepler mission, and TESS is actually finding these. And in fact, for this particular system, today there was an announcement by the Cheops team that they have found a 5th planet around this particular system in a paper that was posted by Bonfanti et al. And so it's very gratifying to see the interest that this system actually has. And looking ahead, I'm sure that there are going to be lots of interest in systems like this as we go forward. Another way in which there's synergy between TESS and the Kepler mission, in particular K2, is shown in this paper by Ma Ukwa, in which she showed that if you go back and look at the K2 planets that were discovered in the K2 mission over the 3 or 4 years in which it operated, you actually can recover these planets, and that's very important because some of these were associated with bright hosts, and they're very promising. And if there's too long a lapse of time with the number of observations that were made for those K2 planets, then they might be lost. In fact, That's what this plot actually shows. As you go out from the time of discovery in the early 20 teens to 2030, the yellow bands indicate how the uncertainty in the ephemerides for these transits would occur. So if you were trying to do an observation with JWST or some future NASA or ESA space mission for which time is so precious, you really would like to have these bands not be a good fraction of a day, but you'd like to have them be much finer. And what Ma actually showed in her paper was that if you combine TESS and K2 data, then you get this blue line associated here, where so that these fans focus down to a very short period. So careful scheduling can actually be made in to make the observations much more practical with these very precious resources like JWST. Okay, now I'd like to talk a little bit more about what we've been doing in the extended mission. The primary mission for TESS was 2 years, and then the extended mission started just this past July 2020, right, of course, in the middle of the pandemic. One of the things that we had done in anticipation for this was to make some changes, very positive changes, in the way that the mission resources were being operated, primarily in terms of uses of the data recording capability that the satellite has. TESS does a one orbit per one downlink per orbit over the deep space network, and it can operate at a very high data rate during that period of time. So we want to store as much data as we can. It's already storing data at a rate that's 10 to 100 times higher than is typical for missions that are operating at locations like L2 or Sun L2. But if you then say, what is the what does this actually? How does this manifest itself? In the prime mission, we actually broke the data down into 2-minute targets and 30-minute targets. So what we chose to do in the extended mission is to make the full frame images, in which every single star, every single object is faithfully recorded in an image. We were able to shorten those times to 10 minutes per FFI. We kept the 2-minute FFIs. But in addition, we brought in a new 20-second data mode that would actually be useful for flaring objects or objects that had very short transit durations or transient events or flaring events that can utilize that type of science data. Now, going forward, another thing that we've been able to do in the extended mission is look at ways in which we could actually go deeper into the collection of stars that we're actually looking at. The surveys that were made that yielded those 2,400 TOIs that I was talking about earlier, those were largely going only to magnitude 10.5. So there's a search that's now been instituted largely by Michelle Kunamoto and Tansu Dalen to try to push this down to magnitude 13.5. And if you do that, then you're talking about examining 20 million stars and a deeper initially, and then that number will go to 50 million stars for a deeper search that'll go down to 15th magnitude. And in fact, the results from this are actually quite encouraging already. There have been 58 new candidates that have been found just in one sector alone. And the expectation from Michelle and Tansu and the team working on this is that there should be of order 10,000 additional planet candidates that will come up with this. So this is going to be a real challenge for the follow-up program, but I'm sure that it's something that they'll be really pleased to step up forward, because it's incredibly important that masses be obtained for as many of these so that atmospheric studies can be carried out with JWST and other missions yet to come. So this slide just gives you an idea of the range of objects that TESS can in fact photometer. And this was made from the GuideStar catalog that Barry Lasker put together a few years ago. This was sort of a precursor to Gaia, and this is a very well assimilated catalog, so it's quite easy to use. So in 26 sectors in 2 years, that's what this red plot is, and then this is what you get for a single sector, which takes a little under a month to carry out. And so the numbers that you get going out to 18th magnitude, in which TESS can do quite good photometry, comparable to what you can do on the ground, you'd have close to 400 million stars down to 18th magnitude that are accessible in the whole sky, and then something like 17 million per sector that are available for studies in a specified portion of the sky. So this gives you a feeling for how much unexplored territory there still remains for TESS to undertake. There's also a growing number of people in the community, largely, who are producing high-level science products from TESS and posting them en masse. Many of these are light curves, and this is sort of a list of what's currently available and the authors of some of those efforts, primarily utilizing the full-frame images. And this gives the number of objects that are involved and what the goals and applications of these are. And then this is a recent one that's being prepared for deposition at MAST by a team led by Michael Fassnow, and that will actually allow full-frame images to be made available quite promptly for studies that will complement these efforts here and can be extended as well. And of course, they would also cover areas related that outside of exoplanets, for which there's a great deal of interest as well. For the extended mission, there are a lot of what we would call special planets that are anticipated, and this is a plot that we put together when we were putting together our extended mission proposal. And by special planets, I mean that there's new small planets, super Earths or at least sub-Neptunes, planets in or near the habitable zone, and planets with longer periods, which would be also interesting in ways that many people are pursuing the preparations for missions that will be fielded in the future. And if you just look, even though we're only extending the observation times by a factor of 2, you might think, well, that would give you a factor of square root of 2. The number of objects are actually going up quite a bit more. And so that's one of the things that we're really appreciating as that mission, as the extended mission has actually gone forward. In terms of the way that we're actually carrying out the sky survey for the extended mission, I'd like to quickly run through the maps that we have of the sky and how that's actually carried out. This was year 1, in which we looked at the southern hemisphere in the 2018 to mid-2019 period. And then these are the sectors that are involved in the second year, with this noticeable area that we did not look at because of the effect of scattered light during that period. And I'll come back to that in a minute. This is what we're doing for year 3. And in year 3, you see we're doing the southern hemisphere again, but the fields of view are offset slightly so that these gaps between the sectors are fully covered. Then if year 4 is a bit more complicated, and this is a series of graphs that Roland van der Spek put together. This is the sky viewed in ecliptic coordinates. And then as you go to sectors 40 and 41, this is where we would look, then to 42 and 46. This is really one of the key goals of year 4, is to do this survey of the ecliptic very thoroughly, which will allow us to recover 15 of the 20 K2 observation fields. And then we step around and then successively cover the rest of the northern hemisphere. So if you actually look at what we end up with in total sky coverage in the mission as a whole, for the prime plus the extended mission, we'll have covered about 88% of the sky, the full 4 pi that you could expect to get, and this will include 15 of the 20 K2 fields. And then as we move forward into later extended missions, this hole that was present over here that was difficult for us to observe in because of scattered light from the bright Earth when it goes through when it approaches the test fields of view, that will then become observable, because that area, because of the test orbit precessing, will move to a different portion of the sky, and that will make that area accessible. So by year 10, it's basically moved halfway across the sky and to another location. So then that'll allow us to complete the rest of that. So in terms of the coming decade and the things that we can expect TESS to do and the missions that are related, this is the timeline for the prime mission. And then if you then see what's going on in the rest of astronomy during that period of time, this was our prime and extended mission here. So we're in this regime right now where eROSITA is operating. That's something that's very interesting for people who are looking at high energy transients and the possibility of TESS will have it. I already showed one example of an exciting new result that's going to come from Cheops. We're waiting to see when Webb launches, there'll be a tremendous number of atmospheric searches and studies and characterizations that will take place. LIGO is going to come back online in 2022. The Rubin telescope will be operating. Rubin and TESS are quite complementary because Rubin saturates for objects that are brighter than the 17th magnitude. So there's a very nice overlap region between TESS and Rubin. And then the EELTs will set in as we move out into the remainder of the decade. And Roman, of course, will come on, and Plato will be launched by the Europeans, and Ariel as well. So all during this period of time, there are Hubble and Chandra and Swift observations that are being coordinated. So I'd like to close with an advertisement. The TESS Science Conference, the second one, will be at MIT this coming August. Well, it'll probably be virtual, but we're keeping our fingers crossed that there will be a possibility for in-person participation, and that would certainly be very gratifying. And then finally, these are the mission takeaways that I've hopefully been able to share with you. One thing we're particularly happy about was the very high science ranking that we were given by NASA in mid-2009 for science merit. And I think we've everything that has happened in the extended mission so far has been very, very gratifying to us, and hopefully consistent with NASA's expectations. And so we've been invited to the Astrophysics Senior Review in 2022, and hopefully that'll allow us to move into these other extended missions. TESS itself has no significant expendables. The momentum management gas or hydrazine that we have on board is enough for 300 years. So we're not worried about anything like that. And the satellite has been very healthy and it's operating in a very robust way. So it's been a very pleasing mission for us to work with. So with that, I'll close and be happy to take